We are live. How are you, Pete?
Yeah, there I am. I didn't know if you were going to do like sing the Mr. Rogers song. I don't know how you begin.
Oh, I just began the way that you begin. In fact, I think I remember hearing you on one of your podcasts saying, "Oh no, I like to capture the moment when
Yeah.
somebody first comes in because it's like gold, right? When you're first
Oh
getting
yeah.
to know."
When I watch comedians and cards getting coffee, the things that I'm most interested in are like how they order breakfast, like what they eat, how they talk to the waiter, how they walk around the room. All these things that might be considered B-roll are like my favorite parts. So like show business can be very slick, and maybe you do a pre-interview and you get the anecdotes, and that's why the late night host always knows to say, so I understand you like flying kites or whatever, and then it leads to the kite story, and that's great for that format. But what I love about podcasting is you can just often, one of my favorite ways of starting is just like how are you like right now, like don't get to what you're promoting, but like how are you walking in, like how was getting here, like what else are you doing today, how do you feel right now, because in my experience people are so complicated, and depending on what mood you catch them in, they might be a completely different person.
Totally. And you never know what kind of day they're having or exactly. But that's why, especially I think if you're a celebrity too, it's kind of hard because everybody has bad days or like moments where they're just not in the mood for whatever. But if
Yeah.
somebody meets you, they're going to remember that moment and they're going to tie
Yeah.
it to you
Yeah.
forever, which I can only imagine can be difficult.
You're right. Giving somebody permission to not be their persona, I think, is always a nice thing to do.
Same. So it's funny. So I was taping once, I had Louis Anderson on the show. And
Hmm.
so it was the same kind of thing where I was just getting the hang of doing it virtually because the pandemic had just begun. And I was like, Louis, I don't know about this light. Can you just do me a favor and just tell me what it looks like if I pull this curtain or whatever? And he's just like, yeah, of course. And then he said, leave this part in though, because people love this kind of thing. And I was like,
Oh.
you know what? You're right. Leave it in. It's the same thing you're saying.
Yeah,
That's why
no,
people
that,
like podcasts so much,
yeah.
right?
I get very worked up about this. I don't know why. I guess just because it's fun to get worked up. But like, I also don't know why podcasts have to either be like 30 minutes long or 60 minutes long, like as if they're on broadcast television. It's like if a show is cooking and everybody's free and having fun, why can't it be a 1 hour and 16-minute podcast? Like nobody, why are we acting like we work for NBC if we don't work for NBC? Like just be as free as the format allows you to be. But people imitate it. You know what I mean? Like they're like,
Yeah.
we want it to seem like a real show, and real shows are an hour. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Or like,
No.
and real shows don't include the moments with the curtains. I'm like, do your show. Like maybe your show does include that. I'm not telling you, I'm telling anybody that would want to do a show.
I get it. I get it. I already know that's how I do my show.
That's
Probably
right.
an hour and 16 minutes is like just around my sweet spot. I do
There you
find
go.
that, right, like sometimes I'll talk too long. So my conversations will go on like nobody really wants to listen to a show, I think, of 3 hours though. You have to admit that, right? So if
That's
you're going to end up
hilarious.
talking to somebody for a really long time, I think you have to cut it at a certain point. But
Yeah,
yeah, I feel like we can
I
do
think
whatever
our
we want to do.
I think our longest, even though I agree with you for the most part, there have been a couple on my podcast, which is called You Made It Weird. I think the record is 3 hours and 40 minutes.
Who was that? Who was the
I
guest?
think it was my former roommate, Matt McCarthy, who is actually on How We Roll, which is really fun to be working with Matt again. Um, but we just got talking. And there are a couple in the 3 hour range, but like typically an average episode of my show is 2 hours.
Yeah, yeah, I like it. So let me ask you about this about podcasting. See, has it changed you? I mean, you've done a ton. You have hundreds of episodes at this point, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I
Has it
think,
changed you, like your personality at all, or like have you grown in any ways, or
well,
changed certain ways about yourself?
for sure. I've been doing this show for 10 years now. So you can listen to me uh, like, I mean, there's a lot of changes. The first things that I think of is like maybe I was eating meat, like I don't eat meat anymore. Maybe I was there was a brief time where I was like obsessed with the philosophy of open relationships. Like that blew my mind. And I was really talking about that a lot. And now I'm married and not in an open relationship, like, so you can watch the sprawling whimsy of a developing young man growing up a little bit and figuring things out. But the thing that I think has changed me the most is that you realize that you really can talk to anybody, and that's a very comforting thought. That's something that I would wish for anybody. And I don't think that's explicitly because I'm like a talented or special person. It's because once you really drill it into your head that no matter who you're talking to, there's something. Like you don't know what it is, but let's find it together. There's something that you will bond over, and bond over hard. A lot of people, I'm not putting this down, but they might kind of opt for things like movies, or I love Star Wars, or I love the Boston Red Sox, or I love these other franchises. I tend onto the show to go like, which parent did you relate to more? When in all of your breakups, did you break up with them or did they break up with you? I'm one of those like, let's share the pain people. That's how I bond. That's how I feel loved. That's how I feel intimacy. And frankly, I'm not saying I'm one of those people that can't do small talk. Like, I just can't do it. I can't talk about the weather. I'll do that. But if it's my show and I'm hosting, I would like to know, how you deal with your depressions, or how you deal with breakups, or how you manage to balance your life, or what you think happens when we die, or what it was like when you lost a loved one. Those are the things that are, I wouldn't say they're my comfort zone, but they're warm to me. I don't like just weighing in on whatever's going on in pop culture, or what I thought of the latest Spider-Man movie. That stuff is going away. But those topics that I just talked about, I mean, those were interesting to Freud. Those were interesting to Marcus Aurelius. Those were interesting to Jesus. It doesn't matter who you were. Like, people have always wanted to talk about those things.
Totally. Well, that's why you have the show, and that's why I have my show. It's exactly the same thing. Those are the things that are so interesting about life, about people. It's all about how we relate to each other, how we experience life. I was a therapist before I did this, so I also have that. To me, it's all about all the things that go inside a person, not just the things you see on the surface. I mean, the surface things are something too, they're meaningful in some way, but it's all about what's going on inside. For me too, I totally get that. So let me ask you about some pain. May I?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Okay. So you're on this media tour now, which, congrats on the show. We'll talk about some details about it in a second, but you're going to be on this media tour saying all the good things, right? About the show, about so good. What is the pain? What's the other side of it? The flip side that people won't see as you're doing this media tour, and as you now have a new sitcom, a new show, a comedy on CBS. What
the dark side of a press tour or of making the show?
Well, I know the dark side of the press tour. I'm familiar with that because, I interview a lot of people, so I know all about that.
Sure.
And I don't do the press tours for that reason. So I get the pain of the press tour. But how about the pain of whatever this entails now moving to this phase of your life?
Well, it's funny. I'm not, if there was, I would happily bring it out and show it to you and delight in shining a flashlight in all the shadows. But making a multicam sitcom was the opposite of pain. It was also the opposite of isolation and quarantine, which is what so many of us are coming out of, is that feeling of you're lacking a community, and you're lacking purpose and routine. And all making How We Roll it really felt like summer camp. And I'm a summer camp kid. Like, I wasn't cool in high school. I was cool in summer camp, because that's a place where having a good attitude and wanting to participate made you popular. So that was my zone. And doing a sitcom, on a single cam show, you might be acting with somebody that you just met, But on a multicam, you're acting with your new friends, like people that you spend every single day with. And you get to do dozens of scenes with them. So you build up this rapport and this routine, and you eat your meals together, and you laugh together, and you rehearse together, and you pitch jokes together, and then you get to film it together. And not only wasn't it a pleasure, but it was some of the most fun I've ever had in show business. There's no reason for me to say that unless it's true. I absolutely loved it. Meaning nobody at CBS is like, you better tell them how fun it was. I would be within my rights to be like, this was a drag. This was hard. It wasn't. It was the opposite of a drag. And I really hope that that comes across on the screen.
Yeah, I think, well, I saw the beginning of it. So I saw the pilot. It looks great. I love it.
Okay.
There's a lot of love that you feel through the show, right? So I think it is that feel-good show. I saw some little sprinklings of more modern life than you might see on a traditional sitcom. So that was nice. And I think you're going to get that. I think it does come across. So
Good.
I'm sure you've seen the whole season, right? How many episodes are they done?
No, I haven't even seen the pilot yet. They tried to send it. Yeah, they sent it to me, but it was for some reason, again, I blame having a 3-year-old and maybe being sleep deprived, but I couldn't figure out how to log into this thing to watch it. And then I was like, you know what? This is a sign. I'm going to watch it on March 31st at 9:30 on CBS, just like everyone else, and maybe watch it with some of the cast for the first time.
Oh, that's cool. So will you watch it with the cast together, or are you going to watch it? Are you getting together at somebody's place?
It really depends on COVID. As you know, we just had it. So I think I'm in the clear to watch it with other people, like antibody-wise, but we'll have to see how everybody else is doing.
Got it. So you and Val, your wife, you both got it?
Oh, yeah, and the baby.
And the baby too?
We just wanted to do something together as a family.
And right before your show is coming out. That's the timing of that.
I know. As you mentioned before we started recording, I was going to be in New York this week, but obviously you can't if you just had COVID. So we're still locked down and keeping to ourselves. But yeah, it wasn't bad, and it hasn't been too bad. We were very fortunate that it was a mild case, but even a mild case is very contagious.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So you'll be clear maybe to watch it on Thursday night, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think that's actually the first day we're able to go see people.
Then it's perfect timing. See, it depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, it does.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
sounds like somebody has COVID there.
I guess it does. Right. So I'm in the middle of New York City, right? In the middle of Midtown. And look, we have a lot of space here at least. So
oh, no, you're fine. I shouldn't have made that joke because people are nervous. But yeah, somebody coughed on your end.
I know. Is it right behind? But I have to tell you, at the distance, I see a lot of people wearing masks in the lobby. So people are masking up.
I don't know. I know it's a divisive issue, but I don't know why those of us who were wearing masks a couple of weeks ago just stopped. Because that's when we got it. We were still wearing masks when we went out, but almost nobody else was. But I mean, what I'm saying is it doesn't seem like we're completely out of it. We're just so ready to be out of it,
Yes, I am totally ready to move on, but it is what it is. So rolling with the punches is how we roll, right? How we roll.
There you go. It comes up a lot.
I was listening to your Zach Braff talk just this morning, actually.
Oh, wow.
That was a really, really good one too.
Yeah.
Lots of good things, from the podcast to the new CBS show. Also Crashing. I wanted to tell you how much I loved Crashing.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
For anybody who is unaware, was your HBO series with Judd Apatow. You made it. So that's also like the dream. I mean, these are all the dreams, right? You get an HBO series. It runs 3 seasons. And I know you were disappointed after it, ended after 3. You would have liked more, but that's a super successful in my point of view, from my perspective.
Oh, yeah. No, I wouldn't even, at the time when the show got canceled, I wouldn't say disappointed was my primary feeling. If you watch the 3rd season, and if people haven't seen it, I hope they do, you can sort of tell around that point that we got a sense that this might be our last season. So we wrap it up. And you can only do that if you sort of see how the writing on the wall. It's like, I think this is our last go. Let's close out these stories and have this be a good series finale, not just a season finale. So it wasn't too much of a shock or a disappointment. I was just happy to be able to have done it. But my friend Yoni, actually, he said to me when this show How We Roll came through, he was like, your career is like WandaVision, because, you know, I did a talk show, then I did a single cam sort of dramedy, and now I'm doing a multicam comedy. He's like, your career's been like WandaVision. You've done every genre of TV. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's really true. It made me really grateful, and how fortunate I've been.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people would kill for one of those things, I'm sure. So to have all the variety, that's cool. Crashing, by the way, I felt like got better and better as it went along. Like it was like you were really feeling it, I think, at a certain point or something. I'm not sure what happened, but I really loved it. And I would have liked to see it go on more. But I do think I saw what you're saying about the third season. So, and like the girlfriend you chose, that you cast in that role of your girlfriend, I forget her name. She had like the whitish.
Oh, Madeline Wise. Yeah.
Like, what an interesting character that you created in her, right? And made for an interesting relationship and experiences for you.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of that was autobiographical. So.
Oh, it was.
Oh yeah, meaning like. Oh sure, all of the relationships were amalgams of different people in different situations, but it was all based in reality, for the most part. I mean, there might be one or two slight deviations or exaggerations, but whenever we were writing, we were trying to come from a true place, instead of just being like, what would a crazy relationship be like? Be like, no, what are the relationships that we had as writers that we felt out of control or a little out of our depth? And what we were trying to do with that was, what do you do when you're like really in love with somebody and you really think they're great, but they scare the hell out of you? They just have like a different approach to life. Like they're intense, like they fight, they yell, they're protective, they might get jealous, they might get this or that. And my whole life, I'm very fortunate. Val, my wife, is like me. Her relationship style is like me. But when you're a young man and you start dating, you quickly figure out that there's lots of different kinds of people, and a lot of them have completely different understandings of what it means to be in a relationship or what it means to be loving. Some people, they think that's what it looks like. Like you should yell at people like that. If you're not yelling, do you even care about me? Like that feels like love to them. To me, I'm like, if you love me, don't yell at me. Like that's just a good rule.
No, I agree, but it's true. It's like kind of depends on how you grew up and who you saw, and how you saw people relating to each other, whether it's your parents or other people in a relationship. And you kind of think of that as the way that it is, I think, for the most part. And so I'm toying with the idea of bringing this up. I don't know if I want to, but it's making me think of the slap at the Oscars, which is just a couple of nights ago. And it was interesting because there were a lot of responses from people who were like, oh, I wish that I had a man who would stand up for me like that, which was an interesting response to me. But again, it is that kind of thing. A lot of things depend on what your experiences were in relationships and growing up.
Yeah, I can absolutely see why you thought of that. For that exact reason, it's never assume that everybody grew up with the same examples of what love might be. Like my parents raised me in this certain style, and it had its weirdnesses too, for sure. But when you're meeting another person, you really have to stay open and listen and try and consider what their perspective might be.
Yeah. And you used to talk about your parents a lot on your podcast.
Yeah, I do. I do talk to them about them from time to time.
So what are some of the gifts that they gave you, and some of the, gift and a curse? What would you say?
Well, it's funny. I was actually just thinking about my father, and obviously, everybody, has certain things that their parents do that maybe they don't like. And I do like to talk about those sometimes on the podcast, just because I think it's more helpful than I don't know, it might be more relatable. Somebody might be able to get more value out of me expressing a feeling and then working my way through it, often with my wife, and finding a new framework and a new perspective. That's more valuable than just talking about what's great about them. But I do try to talk about what's great about them as well. And what I was thinking about with my father is wherever he went, remember you asked me about the podcast, it made me feel like I could talk to anybody. And my father is just one of those people that really was never afraid. Like I've just never seen him afraid. Not that there'd be anything wrong with being afraid. I hope my daughter knows that that's not something I'm like pretending I'm never afraid. But like my dad is just like a very commanding, gregarious, and charismatic person who taught me a very, very important lesson as a comedian, which is when I walk into a room, if I'm performing, or if I'm, or let's say I'm trying to sell a TV show, what my dad did very subtly was he brought the room to him as opposed to mirroring the room. So a room might have its own energy, its own kind of flavor and personality. But when my dad would go into a room, he would bring with him so much. It might be energy, it might be humor, it might just be volume. He's just a loud guy. And that energy would come into him. Like everybody in the room would kind of follow his lead. And he sort of changed the temperature of the room. And that's literally what a comedian does for their living, is they change the temperature of the room. And I definitely learned that from my dad. And my mom, one of the things I love about my mom is that she absolutely speaks the truth and just has no patience for like a half truth or kind of like a nice way to sort of put what you're really trying to say. Like she just wants to talk about it. Like just like if someone is whatever has a problem, they eat too many coconuts, tell them they eat too many coconuts. Like you got to tell them, like just tell them and like cut the crap. And that is not only useful for comedy, but that's just useful for life.
Yeah, no, it's much better than the opposite, which would be you don't want to be around people who you have no idea what they're thinking, right? That's the worst. You want to know, especially in a close relationship with somebody. Like that, you have to know. It's better, in my opinion. I mean, you don't want to be harsh, right? You don't like it if somebody's going to be super harsh about whatever. But maybe there's a balance about that. But I think if you choose one over the other, that's what I would choose personally.
I agree. I like to. It makes me feel safe to know where people stand, and I tend to have very frank friends. And if you like that, you would like comedians because again, one of the skills of a comedian is to figure out what it is and name it. And then the way that we get perspective on it and a little bit of distance or maybe even a way of processing it is by making jokes about it, because you sort of have to understand something if you're going to make fun of it. I know it almost sounds like making fun of it is putting it down. I just mean to make a good joke about something, you really need to understand not only how you see it, how other people might be seeing it. And that's a really nice exercise.
Yeah, I love that. It is so interesting to me, the whole process that you must have to actually come up with your stand-up. Like that's, I guess you just see the world the way that you see it. And then I know like Jerry Seinfeld, for example, talks about crafting, how he really crafts every joke. He gives it a lot of thought, right? And then other people just kind of riff as they're up there on stage or whatever. So what's your process?
I'm definitely in between those two. I used to be way more in Jerry's school. I'd line out the jokes, and like a line break meant I would pause and all that sort of stuff. And I'm grateful for that time, because I think, I'm going to sound like an old man here, but like a lot of people starting out just want to do what Chappelle does and sort of know generally what you're going to say, but like, don't worry, like your instincts will kick in and you'll make it hilarious. And I'm pretty sure that's how he and Bill Burr, and while I'm at it, that's how I come up with my material. It's like, I know how I feel about this. I'm going to go on stage, I'm going to talk about it, and I'll figure it out kind of in the mix. And a lot of people want to jump to that stage of how you make material. But in my opinion, and a lot of people that I know, the first 10 years of stand-up is a lot more bookish and a lot more academic. Like there's typing, there's listening to your sets and taking notes, and and editing and deliberately going like, oh, I think this word would be funnier than this word. Now what I do is if I know how I feel about something really, really strongly, and if I know every time it comes up, I tend to make the people around me laugh, I just write it down. I write down a few key words, key areas, and then just sort of instinctually know, well, the funniest and most absurd place to go with it would be this. So let's save that to the end. You don't want it to peak in the beginning. Save the best part to the end. And then you go on stage and you try it out. But like it takes a very long time to get to the point where you can just go up with an idea and play, because you have to have that self-assuredness. That's actually, if everybody listening were to take something, is like there's a great hump that comedians have to get over to do comedy, but I think everybody would get something out of doing it, which is just green lighting yourself. When you're not a comedian, you've never done comedy, but then you do an open mic, they bring you up as a comedian. Suddenly you're a comedian. And that does something to your psyche. You start to believe, I'm a comedian. I do stand-up comedy. I do. And then you start to look at the jokes you write with a little bit more legitimacy. But really nothing happened. You just went up at a bar at an open mic. So what I'm saying is, like, everybody listening, you can give yourself that authority when you're trying to create and trying to write, just to get yourself going. Just give yourself a green light and say, I deserve this. My voice matters. I know what makes me laugh. I'm going to share that with other people. And more importantly, I'm not going to try and make other people laugh. I'm going to invite them to laugh at what I find funny. If I go up on stage and think I'm going to make these people laugh, that is a terrible attitude. If I go up and say, I'm inviting you to laugh at what I find funny, it's a completely different energy. That doesn't mean I can't be forceful or I can't be persuasive, but it's more like, I know this is funny. If you'd like to join me, you can laugh with me. If you don't, it's okay. I still find it funny. That's a healthy attitude when creating, I think.
That is definitely a healthy attitude with creating, that for sure, for anybody who's creating anything, right? Not just comedy or performance or whatever. It's also like that act as if philosophy, right? You're kind of just be that person, be the comedian, be whatever. And then it kind of just starts to happen normally and naturally after that. So that's so interesting. So what about, are you involved at all in How We Roll in terms of the writing of it? Or are you just playing the lead?
Well, it was a very friendly environment to pitch jokes. So if we were shooting a scene or rehearsing a scene and I had an idea, Mark Gross, the creator, was always happy to hear if I wanted to change the joke. And the cast was also really great. If I had a good joke for them and they were comfortable with that, I would pitch it to them. And if they liked it, they would try it. So it was very collaborative in that way. And then during the season, my mom, we laugh about it, so please don't feel bad, but my mom fell butt first into a laundry basket, and she didn't have her phone, so she was stuck in a laundry basket for a couple hours before my dad found her. And she was telling me the story, and I was laughing, and I was like, we were both laughing, and I was like, this would be perfect. So I asked Mark if I could write an episode, because I had something. Julie White, who plays my mom on the show, I couldn't stop laughing at the idea of Julie White getting stuck in a laundry basket. So he said absolutely, and he gave me an episode that they had kind of outlined a little bit, and I found a way to, like my mom, I wedged in my mom's story. So I did get to do I think it's called a story by credit on one of the episodes, because I took a pass on the script and they rewrote it. But I had a little involvement, that is to say, as opposed to Crashing, which I think except for 2 episodes, I always wrote at least the first draft and often several drafts of every episode. This was a great break to just be like, they'll write it, I'll just try and make it as funny as I can as an actor. And that was a really, really fun game for me.
And you had a studio audience there watching when you
Mhm.
taped each episode. So
A,
you
sm-
kind
a
of get
small one.
that feedback too, right? Were you able to get that feedback?
Yeah, it wasn't. I think a normal audience is like 150 people. We had way less than that. I feel like we had maybe 30 people because of COVID, but they were great, and a lot of them were the same audience the whole time. So we kind of got to know them and recognize not only their faces but their laughs as well, which was really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So I would figure that studio audience would be like really fun. I've heard that about when with the multicam like that, where you will rehearse, you work on it all week, and then finally on a Friday you'll get a whole audience, and it'll be like all kinds of excitement in the air, and it's just like a totally different story. So that's probably something nice that you had that you didn't have on Crashing as well, right?
Yeah, it's true. And it's not exactly stand up, but like when I would do the show during the day, and then if I went out and did stand up that night, I felt like I had been doing stand up all day because I was still standing on a mark under lights, telling jokes in front of an audience. So it felt familiar to me in a very nice way.
Yeah, that's very cool. So tell me about what it feels like with this new show coming out. Like everybody's basically going to check it out. They're going to have opinions about it. Like, is that a little nerve wracking or is it excitement? Like, what are the feelings? What are the feelings that this brings out?
No, no. I don't mean no, I won't tell you my feelings. I mean, it's not exciting or nerve wracking. It's exciting to think of people finding the show, watching the show. The biggest feedback that I'll be looking for is I like to say when we find out we'll get a second season, because I loved making the show so much. So as far as my concerns with it, now that it's out of my hands, I hope people find it and like it and watch it so that we get to keep doing it. Not just for the fact that they would like it and I would know that they liked it. That's okay, but it's a slippery slope. I'm on social media, but only to promote things, if that makes sense. Like I don't go on the apps to like check the comments or to check the messages or the chat replies or anything. I just text things to my assistant, honestly, and she posts it. So I do have accounts, but I noticed right away, I was like, or not that long ago, actually, I was like, this is not healthy for me. It's like opening the window to a very crowded street, but it's so much more dangerous than that, because it's a street, if you're in your at replies or if you're in your comments, it's a crowded street where they're just talking about you. And that is not healthy. And I would say that's not even appropriate for any human psyche. It's not healthy or appropriate if it's all good stuff, and it's not healthy or appropriate if it's all bad stuff. You start to look for and everybody knows this, I'm not breaking any new ground here, but you start to look for your value and your identity outside of yourself and outside of relationship, where there's a give and a take. So to go with my metaphor, it's like a busy street. You put your head out, somebody might yell, "You suck," or "You should die." I mean, people say terrible things all the time. And that's scattered amongst "I love you" or "You're the greatest thing in the world." And just speaking as a mammal, like the human animal is not equipped to deal with that level of whiplash between I hate you, I love you. And when you take one step back, you realize these people, a lot of them don't really hate you, and a lot of them don't really love you. Like it's just sort of noise. Not all of it, but a lot of it is just sort of, it's just what's happening. It's just the sound of the internet. And then you ask yourself, well, why am I subjecting myself to that? So when it comes to a show premiering, I get it the old-fashioned way. I'll hear about it when the data is compiled, and if we get to keep doing it, or the general consensus, or the highlights if it gets reviewed or something. Somebody will tell me about it, but I don't go seeking that out, because that's a real addiction. That's it can be very tricky.
So at one point, were you, what happened on social media? Like you were paying attention and you were like, oh, no. You realized it after a certain amount of time, or what happened with you personally?
Well, there was no moment. It's just you catch yourself going through your comments and you're reading the good ones, if you want to call them that, the nice ones. And you notice in the back of your mind, you're kind of looking for a bad one. Like it's almost, I'm not a masochistic person, but like the brain, if someone says something negative to you, that sticks. This is the Velcro Teflon theory. That sticks like Velcro. It's effortless. If I say your show stinks, that sticks to you effortlessly. That's just how the human brain works. But if I say your show is amazing, I love it, never stop doing it, unfortunately, if you don't pause, and I believe it's 30 seconds, again, they have the data for this, the neuroscience, you have to pause and really contemplate that compliment for 30 seconds in order to get it to stick to you, or else it slides off like Teflon. This is the Teflon part. So in that sense, the charge and the juice and the literal stickiness of a bad comment is sort of part of it. You like the downers and the uppers, and whatever you enjoy about social media, you realize it's just training you to rely on something non-essential to you, not organic to you, not inside of you, as I already said, for your value. And there wasn't a moment. I just was like, this isn't working for me. And everybody knows that. I mean, everybody knows. I'm always struck by, like, if you watch a movie and people are in like a mental hospital, and they like the Queen's Gambit or whatever, and they're giving you the little cups of pills, and you look around, you're a new patient, and everybody's taking these pills, and they start acting differently. They're a little bit more erratic. They're a little bit meaner. They're louder. They're harder to please. They're harder to satisfy. They might be buying things that they don't need. They're compulsive, and you notice it's all because they started taking these pills. Everybody wants to think, well, I wouldn't take the pills, right? You would put them under your tongue and spit them out, or you throw them out the window when no one was looking. But the truth of the matter is that is the situation we're in. People are getting hooked to this never-ending stream of noise, and it does change how we act. It changes how we process reality. It changes how we spend our money, where we put our attention. It changes the thoughts in our mind. That changes the makeup of your soul, of your not your literal soul, but like who you are as a person. So it's nice to think that you would be the rabble rouser that wouldn't take the pills in the mental institution. But the truth is, most of us are taking the pills. And even though I'm not taking the social media pills, there's plenty of pills that I'm taking, like metaphorical pills. I'm taking
like
pills
what?
as well.
What are the metaphorical pills?
I mean, take your pick. You content that you stream, movies, music, it's all being curated by somebody else. I'm not saying it's evil or anything. I'm saying it, bless you to the people sneezing. I'm saying, I'm just trying to relate and say, I'm not saying I'm better or I've stopped or I've opted out completely, but in the ways that I'm able to opt out and still have a good life and feel happy, getting off social media was one of the things I stopped taking.
Yeah, it makes sense. I know you're not judging; you're just relating. I get it. It is what it is. Our world is what it is right now, and it's hard to know what the impact is. But when you can actually see it and feel it, and then get perspective on it, then yeah, it's great that you can do something about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have some deepish questions for you. Not like I haven't already. We haven't already been talking about deep things, but looking back, what is one of There's a lot of sneezing going on behind me. Sorry. What is one of your regrets in life?
Oh boy, I don't want to be one of those annoying people that says I don't have any regrets, but I don't have any regrets. I'm divorced. I don't regret that. I've had shows canceled. I've had terrible sets. To me, one of my core beliefs is that the way human beings grow and change is when things are disrupted, and often when we lose control. So the definition I would use for suffering is when we're a very general sense is when we're out of control. But as one of my great teachers, his name is Richard Rohr, he taught me human beings don't change unless what they're doing stops working. Otherwise, why would you change? If what you're doing is working, you will never change. So those disruptions, those things that maybe people would regret, are actually the juiciest and often most life-giving moments in your life. The things that you would never ask for. Obviously, my big example has always been my first marriage. My wife left me for another person. She was having an affair for a while, and then she told me. And I mean, what would I be doing if I laid around and went like, boy, what wasted time? Or the quarantine. I heard people go like, well, those were wasted years. It's like, no, this is life. This is how life goes. There's contraction, and then that leads to expansion. They define one another. There's being in control, there's being out of control. They define one another. So in general, I would say a no regrets philosophy, meaning have I had suffering or have things not gone my way? Absolutely. But when you get even just a little bit of perspective on those things, you recognize them as the catalyst for the change that you needed and the message that you needed.
How about one of the biggest lessons that you've learned about relationships?
Okay. We talked about some of the longer podcasts that I've done, and often the longer podcasts that I did were often about breakups, where people going through breakups. And I was always one of these people. Again, I got married when I was 22. My wife and I, the first wife, split when I was 28. So I just sort of missed my 20s. And then I started dating in my late 20s and into my 30s. And I didn't really know what I was doing in a lot of ways. But the one that caused me the most suffering was if I was dating somebody and it wasn't right. And I knew it wasn't right, meaning it didn't feel like it was going to be a fit long term. Um, I really believed that you had to hate somebody to break up with them. And it was my wife told me this, and my therapist told me this, and I believe they were quoting somebody else. I don't know who said it first, but the lesson was just because something ends doesn't mean it was a failure. And owning that it's actually more loving to tell somebody, hey, I'm not happy and this isn't working for me, than it is what I thought, which was be nice, don't hurt somebody, never hurt somebody, even if it's telling them that you don't want to be in that relationship. Don't do that. That's not what good boys do. That's not what nice people do. And then I remember Emily Gordon, when she did my podcast, she told me that she was like, you're being more hurtful. You're being more deceitful. You're being more nasty. If you're pretending to like somebody and smiling to their face, and then when they're not there, hating them, or just knowing this is more of a friend than it is a partner, or worse, telling all your other friends, I know this isn't the right romantic person for me. That is way more. Not only is it duplicitous, but it's hurtful and it's dishonest. So I learned just because something ends doesn't mean it's a failure. And I learned that speaking your truth is always more loving than doing an impression of a person who still wants to be in that relationship.
Totally. And you can kind of, to show yourself that, you can kind of picture yourself in the other person's situation. So you may think you're doing the right thing by them and you're being nice and respectful, but at the same time, how would you feel if that was how somebody who you loved was feeling and doing about you? You know, they were trying to do the right thing, but it's not. So if you just put yourself in their place, it's a little easier to see that. You
Yeah,
sure do
that's
have some
great.
perspective. I'll tell you what. You have a lot of perspective on life. You have thought a lot about everything,
Well,
right?
that's what we
Am I
do. I
right?
mean,
That's what we do,
we've
but
been,
you really do it a lot. I think that you seem to really thrive off it. Like you really like it. You feel it seems to motivate you. I think it's one of the key elements for you. Am I right?
yes, I'm not here to not talk about it. That's for sure.
So let's talk about therapy. So have you been in therapy for a while? Do you go regularly? What is it like for you? What's your experience been?
A lot of people complain about therapy in that it's like a never-ending thing, and your therapist doesn't really want you to get well, because then you would stop paying them, or whatever it might be. But my experience, my therapist's name is Dr. Gary Penn. He has a podcast. He has a book. He's wonderful. Changed my life. Um, and I saw him. I'm not very good with time, but I saw him for years, and he helped me through a lot of breakups. A lot of those things that I was just saying were things that Dr. Gary Penn told me. And then at a certain point, we stopped. It was right around Crashing. When Crashing started and I went to New York, that is when we concluded our time. Meaning, I was seeing him once a week for, like I said, several years. And then I was like, I think we could maybe do once a month. And you can tell because, you have less to say. You're starting to figure him out. He becomes another archetype in your brain, meaning you have an issue, you can see him in your mind. What Gary Penn would always say was, so what? Like, you'd have some shame about a feeling you had, and I would always hear Dr. Penn being like, so what? Like, you're not hurting anybody, you just had a feeling, it's okay. Like, it doesn't make you a bad person that you were mad at someone in traffic or whatever it is. And that he becomes another voice in your head, so you don't have to ask him as much. And then after once a month, we started doing once every couple months. And then there was never a goodbye session. I just was like, hey, I'll call you when I need you. And that was many years ago. So I say that to say therapy was super important to me. It changed my life. I'm a huge believer in having a safe space to talk about your feelings, especially in a non-personal way. Like, I can talk to Val about everything, although maybe that's not obvious. We have the type of relationship where we can talk about anything, but there's something about having a person where you don't have to apologize for repeating yourself. You don't have to say, I'm so embarrassed that I'm still dealing with this feeling. Because with friends, you maybe get 5 times to bring up the breakup per week. Like, you can't only talk about a breakup. But with a therapist, that's exactly what they're there for. That's what the money is for. I need to talk about the breakup for 1 hour straight, and he will listen, and he will give feedback. So I'm a big believer in therapy.
Totally. I love that. Of course, as a former therapist, of course, I'm pro therapy as well. So you internalized him, right? So his voice, that's why you hear it, or you started hearing it in your head. So that's great. So whatever it was, his insights, they taught you, and then you were able to bring that with you. So that's a good sign. And sometimes you need to go for longer than other times. But if you recognize that and actually took that with you, it's like the gift that never stops giving. So that's
Yeah,
one. And then the second thing also is that just the relationship you had with him and the ability for you to go in and not be judged, because he was the one telling you, no, no, so what if you got mad at somebody on the road or whatever, it was. He showed you that you don't have to judge yourself. And so that's something that maybe you don't hear in your head, but that's just another thing that you got out of
that's
it,
right.
I'm sure. Hmm.
And for some reason, he was an older than me man. Those archetypes, like having a paternal kind of energy, that was right for me. I was kind of, I still am, but I was sort of learning what it meant to be a grown man. So to have, I hesitate to call him an elder, but he is older than me. So like an elder, he's not that old, but having that type of gravity to him was helpful. And those images are important. Having an older man tell me to love and forgive myself consistently helped me build the mechanism in myself that when I had, this is something Val says all the time, and her teacher Tara Brock said it to her, which is, it's not the feeling that we have a problem with, it's the shame that we have the feeling. And that is really true for me. If I have a moment of impatience, it's not that I was impatient, it's that I feel ashamed. I thought I was a patient person. I thought I was better than this. And when you can make it automatic, that you see the feeling, you give it some space, you can even welcome it. I like to welcome those negative feelings because they don't know what to do with that. Things like anger, things like shame, embarrassment, humiliation, they don't know what to do when you stop pushing against them and you just say, okay, come on in. It sort of disarms them and confuses them, in my experience. And then you just go, it's okay. Or in Dr. Gary Penn's voice, who cares? Who cares? Who cares? That's what he would always say.
That's the best. Like those 2 words, who cares?
Who
How
cares?
powerful is
his
that?
next book should be called Who Cares?
Yes, it should be.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you've learned a lot. And then now you're going to apply everything to your daughter.
Well, that would be presumptuous to think that I could pour all of this into her. I would say, as a parent, so far, some parent, I get conflicting messages. Some of them are like, no, it's great. You will directly teach them and advise them. But I know it really depends on her lifestyle, meaning her style of living. Some people, like me, I like being taught. If you have a shortcut to life, I not only will I listen, I'll write it down and I'll thank you for it. I just like advice. I don't understand, especially when you're doing like something like stand-up comedy. Mike Birbiglia comes to mind. Mike is a good friend of mine, and he and I swap advice. This is what it's like in this lane. This is what it's like in this lane. And you're literally saving somebody years if they like advice. And there are some people, and I learned this having different openers over the years, or just different friends that are comedians. Some people, you start giving them advice and they hate it. They absolutely shrivel up and want to die. And I really want to find that balance. I know a lot of people that resent and cringe when they're with their parents, because to this day, they won't stop giving them advice. So as corny as it sounds, I'm really trying my best to guide and help. Like, help is a better word. And listen and observe and try and give. Val and I both think of her as like a garden. We're there to pull weeds. We're there to water and give sunlight. Sunlight might be love. I try to see her and lock on to her, not just look at her, but see her and listen to her and remember things that she likes and things that she says, and be present and accommodating to her feelings. That is so much more important to me than having her say, mirror my spiritual beliefs, mirror my psychological beliefs, mirror my taste. I don't care if she loves comedy or doesn't love comedy, in the same way that I don't care if a flower blooms this way or that way. We're just here for sunlight and water.
Again, that's good perspective. But I think also, besides just giving your daughter advice, right, you're going to be passing on just this awareness that you have, this self-awareness, and just these philosophies. I'm sure you and Val talk about them regularly as you're going about your day. So she's going to grow up just kind of hearing these things too. So they may not be like, you may not be spoon feeding everything to her, but it's all going to be absorbed.
Well, that is the best. You know what I always think about is peas. Is my father always used to eat peas in a bowl with a spoon. He'd just make himself a bowl of peas. And to this day, I'm just like, you know, it's really cool to eat a bowl of peas. Like it's just because of my dad. So I definitely, and my dad always says, like, you didn't know, I never knew you guys were watching, but you were. And he says that to me. He goes, don't forget, your daughter's watching. And I'm like, yeah, I don't forget. Like that is maybe my main thing, is going like, I am conscious and aware that she sees whatever my bowls of peas are. So I hope I can give her some good peas.
Yeah, I think that's great. So this was fun, Pete. Thank you so much for this. Let's make sure everybody knows everything about the show. So it premieres on Thursday, March 31st on CBS. What is it, 9 o'clock? Am I getting the time right? 9 o'clock
9:30.
Eastern? 9:30
9:30.
Eastern. Okay, so it's part of like a whole lineup, and I guess, what is there, like 4 shows in a row or something for?
I know it's on after Ghosts, so don't be afraid of the ghosts. Watch Ghosts and then stick around for How We Roll, which is on 9:30 on Thursday.
So by the way, what happens? Like, when will you know if this is getting a second season?
I don't know. That's a good question. I've heard maybe April and maybe May, around then. So after a good number have aired.
I'm excited for you, happy for you. Love all the different things you've done in your life. It's great, and I wish you all the best. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for watching.
Bye, everyone.